Imagine building one of the fastest jet fighters of the 1950s, a sleek Navy interceptor designed to break the sound barrier, and then discovering it was fast enough to shoot itself down, not metaphorically, literally. Because in 1956, a Grumman F-11 Tiger pilot fired his guns, and a few seconds later flew directly into his own bullets. But that strange moment was only part of the story, because the Tiger was also one of the most elegant Navy fighters of its era. A supersonic jet that looked like it had been drawn by a kid imagining the perfect fighter plane. And recently, I got to actually see one of these rare aircraft in person. I'm Bill, and this is Buffalo Air Park. Let's dive in. During the early 1950s, the U.S. Navy was racing into the supersonic age. Grumman Aircraft Corporation, the same company that built the legendary Hellcat during World War II, wanted to create the Navy's next-generation carrier fighter. At first, the project was supposed to be a simple upgrade to the earlier F-9F Cougar. But as engineers kept refining the design, something interesting happened. The Cougar slowly disappeared from the blueprints. In its place was an entirely new airplane. The result became the F-11F Tiger. The aircraft made its first official flight on July 30th, 1954, and entered Navy service less than a year later in April of 1955. It was a compact, single-seat carrier fighter designed for speed, agility, and high-altitude interception. And visually, it looked fantastic. One pilot later described the Tiger perfectly when he said it looked like a kid's drawing of what a real jet fighter should look like. Slim nose, swept wings, and a distinctive wasp waist fuselage that narrowed in the middle like a Coke bottle. That unusual shape wasn't for style. It was based on a relatively new aerodynamic concept called the aerial rule, developed by NACA scientist Richard Whitcomb. By narrowing the fuselage where the wings attached, engineers reduced drag near the speed of sound, allowing aircraft to push more efficiently through the transonic barrier. The Tiger was one of the first Navy jets designed with this principle in mind. And it worked. The aircraft could cruise at around 577 miles per hour and had a range of roughly 1,275 miles. Impressive numbers for a compact carrier fighter of the era. Only about 200 Tigers were built between 1954 and 1959, but one of them ended up making aviation history in a way no one expected. On September 21, 1956, Grumman test pilot Tom Attridge took an F-11 Tiger up for a routine weapons test. The plan was simple. Climb to altitude over the Atlantic Ocean, put the aircraft into a shallow dive, and fire a few bursts from the jet's 4 20mm cannons. Attridge began the test around 20,000 feet, diving gently while accelerating. At about 13,000 feet, he fired the first burst. A few seconds later, he steepened the dive and fired again. And then suddenly, smack! The windshield was shattered. The nose cone was damaged. The engine began vibrating violently. At first, Attridge thought he had hit a bird, but the situation got worse very quickly. As he attempted to return to the runway, the engine began making a sound he later described as like a Hoover vacuum cleaner picking up gravel. The engine failed completely. The Tiger crashed into a grove of trees short of the runway. Attridge survived with a broken leg and several fractured vertebrae, but the investigation that followed revealed something astonishing. Inside the damaged engine compressor, they found a battered 20mm projectile. Attridge didn't hit a bird. He had hit his own bullets. Here's what likely occurred. When Attridge fired his cannons, the rounds left the aircraft traveling extremely fast, but bullets slow down quickly because of air resistance. As they lose speed, they also begin to arc downward. Meanwhile, Attridge kept accelerating during the dive. Eventually, the Tiger was moving fast enough that it literally caught up to the projectiles he had fired seconds earlier. And, as his flight path intersected their trajectory, the jet flew straight into its own gunfire. It remains one of the strangest incidents in aviation history. The U.S. Navy reportedly described it as a 1,000,000-to-1 shot, but Attridge himself wasn't entirely convinced. At the speeds jets were reaching in the 1950s, he believed something like this could happen again. Thankfully, the pilot survived, and the Tiger continued flying. Despite its impressive design, the F-11 Tiger's frontline Navy career was surprisingly short. The aircraft entered service in 1955, but by the early 1960s, it was already being replaced by more capable fighters like the F-8 Crusader and later, the F-4 Phantom II. Part of the problem was the Tiger's engine. It was powerful, but thirsty, and the aircraft had relatively limited range compared to newer jets. By 1961, most fleet squadrons had moved on. But the Tiger wasn't finished yet, because one group of Navy pilots absolutely loved it. From 1957 all the way until 1969, the Navy's famous flight demonstration team flew the F-11 Tiger. Its smooth controls, powerful afterburner, and tight handling made it perfect for formation aerobatics. For more than a decade, airshow crowds across the country watched the Blue Angels perform breathtaking maneuvers in the sleek little Grumman fighter. And in many ways, that's where the Tiger truly made its mark. Recently, I had a chance to see one of these aircraft in person. During a visit to the Maps Air Museum in North Canton, Ohio, I spotted a Grumman F-11 Tiger sitting in their outdoor display area. The aircraft on display carries bureau number 141783 and has quite a history. It was built by Grumman in 1957 and delivered to the U.S. Navy later that year. The jet served with VF-33 at Naval Air Station Oceana, deploying aboard the aircraft carrier USS Intrepid during Mediterranean cruises in the late 1950s and early 1960s. After its operational career ended, the aircraft spent years in storage before eventually being displayed aboard the USS Intrepid Sea Air Space Museum in New York. In 2004, it was transferred to the Maps Air Museum, where it sits today on loan from the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida. Standing next to it, the Tiger still looks exactly like that pilot described. Small, sleek, almost like a model airplane that somehow grew to full size. And knowing the strange story behind it, you can't help but smile. Because few aircraft in history have managed to achieve something quite so unusual. The Grumman F-11 Tiger may not have had the longest combat career, but it helped push naval aviation into the supersonic era. It thrilled crowds with the Blue Angels. And it earned one of the most bizarre distinctions in aviation history. It became the first jet fighter to shoot itself down, not because of an enemy, not because of a mechanical failure, but simply because it was flying too fast for its own bullets. And that wraps up another tale from aviation's stranger side. Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies.